Chapter 2. Playing Trumpet and the Elementary School Band. Upon entering the 5th grade, my sights were focused on getting into the marching band. Since I had my eye on the drums for quite a while from 1st grade on, that was my goal. Of course, every other kid had his eye on the drums too. That meant that I now had to consider taking up a different instrument, finally settling on the trumpet. That was pretty disappointing. With a year of playing guitar under my belt, my music reading was enough to get by. That would make it somewhat easier. It was now just a matter of relating the written notes to the horn, but also battling with developing the lip technique. The band director and music teacher was Mrs. Chamberlain. She was a tough and crotchety old broad. I don't remember ever seeing her without a whistle around her neck. Before the 5th grade, she would be barking orders to the band like an army sergeant during one of the outside parade rehearsals. She seemed tough and almost scary from a distance, but when she began giving me trumpet lessons in the fall of 1963, I really grew to like her. When spring rolled around after the new year in 1964, we began parade marching practice on the playground. I can remember looking forward to wearing the same uniforms the band had worn in previous years. Disappointment soon set in when it was revealed that the regular uniforms wouldn't be worn that year. This year, we would dress up like Native American Indians for the New Jersey tercentenary celebration of 300 years from 1664 to 1964. That term Indian was norm then, since political correctness was decades away from raising its ugly head. That being said, the term Native American definitely sounds more respectful and proper now. The band's new appearance couldn't just be a simple process of getting some uniforms or costumes, if you will. Of course not. These were get-ups that we had to construct ourselves. I'm speaking of the headdresses that came to us in the form of craft kits that had to be assembled. They required the threading of hundreds of beads and the insertion of the feathers a certain way. All of a sudden, we went from being a marching band to a home economics crafts class. As we marched in that parade in Middletown, New Jersey, celebrating New Jersey's 300 years, these headdresses were not at all roadworthy. Soon after the parade began, feathers and beads were showing up all over the road. This wasn't exactly top-of-the-line Native American headwear. Granted, the lack of craftsmanship by many frustrated parents trying to put these monstrosities together played a big part. What should have looked like a proud and pristine group of New Jersey Native Americans marching proudly to represent their heritage appeared more like a group of wounded warriors staggering back from Custer's last stand. The chaperones walking with the band were carrying armloads of headdress remnants as they steadily deteriorated to the roadside while we marched. It was not pretty. Really quite painful. We were ever so glad to eventually see those previous band uniforms finally show up. Mrs. Chamberlain retired after that year, not that I could blame her. The classroom music teacher, Mr. Cortese, then took over as band director. The next couple of years saw me playing trumpet in the band under Cortese. He was a little short, frustrated man that had a bad habit of hitting and slapping kids as disciplinary action. For one reason or another, he had popped me a time or two in class back in the 3rd or 4th grade. Maybe it was deserved, but I had no idea what it was for on another occasion. Later on, Cortese actually handpicked another kid and myself to play taps on our trumpets at the town monuments for the Veterans Day and Memorial Day ceremonies. It was a real honor to be selected. Between that and the parades, it was a lot of fun and a good time, but those drums were still calling. In the meantime, I was learning the 3 predominant drum cadences the band played. They were Firehouse 1, Firehouse 2, and Chamberlain, a cadence that was the product of Mr. Chamberlain, the previous band director's husband, who was basically the drum coach. I would practice daily out in my backyard on metal bucket bottoms with thick wooden horseshoe game poles. It drove the neighbors crazy. A year or two later, a snare drum showed up under the Christmas tree. That in itself took the infatuation to the next level. I would sneak into the band room early on some mornings before school in order to get to the drums and practice. Maybe I was getting pretty good, but who could tell? Better yet, who cared? It was just plain fun. Then sometime in 1966, the band was set to march in a parade in Red Bank, New Jersey. While everybody was getting in position on the side street, all of a sudden it became apparent that no drummers were present. The bass drum and cymbal guys were there, but no drummers. Cortese turned to me and said, "Okay, Rog, here's your chance." Scared and excited at the same time, I couldn't believe it. Strapping the drum on that day in uniform was a surreal experience. Then the parade began and we were marching. I was having a ball and feeling on top of the world. Being the only drummer, I could play whatever cadence I wanted to the straight 4/4 beat of the bass drum. The bass guy did a good job of holding the beat steadily. The only one that had to be on his toes was the cymbal guy. I have no recollection whatsoever of who was or wasn't there that day. The point was that the marching band event came off like clockwork. Cortese was ecstatic. I had saved his ass, along with the band. He treated me better from that point on. I'm not sure if I even touched the horn again after that until high school. Whether I did or not, I don't remember. I didn't care. Now I was part of the drum section. 8th grade graduation was a big deal at Keansburg Public School. During the pre-graduation afternoon awards presentation for the student body in the auditorium, all of the athletes and smart kids were receiving theirs. I was in the band group on stage to receive our band letters. Suddenly, right after those were passed out, Cortese pulled something else out of the bag. He said, "And now I have a special award for Roger Wilson. He stepped forward last year when we needed a drummer and he did a great job." It was unexpected and totally caught me off guard. I was both appreciative and embarrassed at the same time. Having grown about 3 feet since the 3rd grade, it made me wonder laughingly years later if Cortese had given me that special award for a reason. Maybe it was to avoid having me come back after graduation and throw him off the roof as payback for all the previous slaps. Who knows? Upon graduation from 8th grade in 1967, my sights were set on heading to prep school in Georgia. Who knew whether music would even be a part of my future? Jump ahead many years later to early 2001. I was on tour in New Jersey about to play at the Downtown Cafe in the same town of Red Bank. While stepping out front for some air before my show, it suddenly occurred to me that this bar was right at the same intersection where Cortese had given me my first chance to step out and prove myself. It was the exact spot where he handed me the drumsticks on that day back in the early 1960s. While standing on the sidewalk in front of the club on that night just before my first set, I tried to take in what had transpired there 40 or so years before. It was quite surreal, at least for a minute or two. Then it was time to go back in and play my guitar, the instrument that was here first, for the folks waiting inside. If they only knew, life goes on.